The wind hammered against the wooden frame of the diner, a relentless force that rattled the glass panes in their casings. Cassidy Dustbloom pushed the heavy door open, bracing her shoulder against the gale until the others followed her inside. They moved to a corner booth, shaking the grit from their hair and palms. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and burnt sugar. Moments later, the floorboards groaned under a new weight. Sadie Bell Rowan stepped through the entrance, her spurs clicking a rhythmic, metallic beat. She pulled a chair to the edge of the booth, and the tension of the storm outside vanished. For an hour, the diner was a sanctuary of noise. Laughter bounced off the walls, and stories filled the gaps between sips of black coffee. The group leaned in, trading tales. A traveler at the counter turned, his voice cutting through the din. He spoke of a shop nearby, serving legendary Halloween-themed desserts. The group exchanged sharp, curious glances. They stood in unison, pushed their chairs back, and strode toward the door. The horses slowed to a halt in front of the shop. No lights glowed from the windows. No scent of sugar hung in the air. Cassidy jumped down, her boots hitting the dirt with a heavy thud. She pushed the door, but it swung loosely on a single, bent hinge. Inside, the scene was a jagged mess. Tables lay on their sides, legs splintered like dry kindling. Glass shards crunched underfoot, a sharp, rhythmic sound that echoed in the hollow room. Vexa swept a lantern across the floor, revealing overturned shelves. The legendary desserts were gone. Elara knelt by the counter, running a hand over the splintered wood, finding only dust and jagged edges. The silence was absolute, heavier than the wind outside. Kale walked to the porch, his eyes scanning the mud near the threshold. He stopped, pointing his lantern downward. A set of deep, heavy boot prints cut through the soft earth, leading away into the dark expanse. The group gathered around the marks, their faces hardening. They turned back to their horses, checked their gear, and mounted up. The hunt had begun. The trail wound through the jagged landscape for miles, a path marked by crushed weeds and displaced stones. Cassidy led the way, her eyes locked on the faint indentations in the dirt. Every few minutes, they stopped to listen, but the plains remained hollow and silent. The cold air bit at their skin as they navigated a narrow gorge, the walls closing in like a tightening fist. Suddenly, the tracks disappeared into a dense thicket of brush. Kale signaled a halt, raising a hand to stop the group. They fanned out, moving with practiced efficiency, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Vexa found the break in the rock face, a narrow, hidden fissure masked by dry vines. A faint, muffled sound of voices drifted from within. They reached the mouth of the cave, the air growing thick with the scent of stolen sugar and damp earth. Before a single shot could ring out, a figure stepped from the deepest shadow. Jolly Halloway moved with a blur of motion, his hands darting into a heavy bag. He did not shout. He threw. A handful of hardened candy corn whistled through the air, striking the lead thief in the wrist with the force of a lead slug. The revolver clattered against the stone floor. Another volley followed, peppermint discs spinning like razor-sharp blades, shattering the grip of a second gunman. The thieves recoiled, clutching their bruised hands and howling in surprise. Cassidy and Vexa did not hesitate. They lunged forward, closing the gap in 2 long strides, slamming the culprits against the damp cave wall before they could reach for knives. The air filled with the sound of scuffling boots and the frantic thud of crates being dragged. Elara and Kyle moved to the center of the fray, ignoring the chaos to secure the heavy loot crates. They heaved the wooden boxes into a defensive perimeter, their movements sharp. With the thieves bound, the group hauled the crates back to the shop. They spent hours sweeping glass, hammering the door back into place, and helping Jolly restore his display. Once the shop was pristine, they rode to Cassidy's house. They slumped onto the sofas, clicking on an old television set to watch a grainy black and white show. Cassidy moved to the kitchen, lighting the stove and preparing a hearty dinner. The smell of roasted meat filled the room. They ate in silence, exhausted from the night's work. Finally, they retreated to separate rooms, extinguishing the lamps one by one, and falling into a deep, heavy sleep as the house went dark.